I'll request my panelists to be here. I think 3 of them are already here. I can see Dr. Feakin over here. Sarah Taylor is also here. Ambassador Tallow is also here. It's good that Dr. Sayan is also here. Now, since we have only 4 panelists, so looking at the time allotted to us, I'll request each panelist to cover, say, his topic in, say, 10 minutes, so that we can have some good time for interaction after that. Of course, when we talk in terms of cyber for prosperity, there are many things which are happening, especially across the globe, and this part of the globe. You all know that India has made very big strides, and because of our sheer numbers, whenever we talk, it becomes in terms of billions, and so. We have unique identity for 1.19 billion people. And when we have gone for, say, direct benefit transfer, worth $36 billion, and people say that that has led to 1/4 of it as savings from leakages. So to save $9 billion, I think it's a big amount for any developing country. And in the context of SDGs, which I was handling in Niti Aayog till a few months back, it's not that these are additional targets to be achieved, that, okay, we have to achieve 17 goals and 169 targets and indicators, so we have to work on these indicators also. Much more than that, the indicators related to IT are meant to make us achieve all the goals, be it through penetration of internet, mobile telephony, digital locker, and there are so many means and so many ways to utilize it. So without going too much on it, I'll request the first panelist, Dr. Tobias Feakin, Ambassador for Cyber Affairs from Australia, to start his discourse. Thank you.
Okay, I was just deciding whether to stay sat down or speak from the podium, but we'll stay sat down and speak from our chairs. I always find it a little bit more difficult to be dynamic, though, from being in a seated position, but we'll see what I can do. I think it's always interesting just to look back a little bit at where we've come from to see where we're heading to next. And certainly, you know, we know, and we've heard many people say through this conference how far we've come over the last 15 to 20 years in terms of connectivity rates and the kinds of opportunities that connectivity has allowed us. We're now so plugged in, it's so instantaneous, everything that we do, that we sometimes forget exactly that advancement that we've made. Our economies are growing at paces and scales because of the digitization of those economies in a way that we could never have conceived of even 10 years ago. Our infrastructure is kept operating and interconnected through digital platforms. And our governments are enabled and people connected all through the online space. And you've heard all of us, I think, throughout this conference keep reminding ourselves of that as policymakers, because it means we've got to try and keep up with that rate of change. As I said, I don't think any of us could have actually imagined 15 years ago where we might have come from now. And if you go back even further than that and think about the first mainframe computers that would have taken up an entire room and cost in the region of $3.5 million a piece, which at the time would have been a whole lot more than $3.5 million sounds like now. And we're only available through a handful of organizations. And now by the 1990s, you were looking at desktop computers on every desktop in a way that I imagine if you look back at those mainframe times, you'd never have imagined conceivable. And now when we pick up our cell phone, it's got more processing power than all of the computers that sent people to the moon in '69 and the whole NASA program. So I guess if we look forward maybe in 35 years, maybe it means that we can have a passenger jet in our garage. I don't know if that's a good analogy, but it gives us an idea of where we've come from. And we used to talk about 6 degrees of separation that used to divide us as human beings. And now if you look at Facebook and its 2 billion plus users, there have been studies to show that now we're down to an average of 3.57 degrees of separation. So we're getting closer as a human race because of it. So we look at the kind of hyperconnectivity that's going on and the kind of big data that's coupled to that. And really it gives us a kind of recipe for tremendous innovation and growth. and we're only really just seeing that potential. And something that we've now seen is that this is clearly being recognized by the United Nations and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. It recognizes that digital technologies are as vital to ending poverty now and overcoming other social challenges, and that new technologies now allow us to expand access to quality education, promote inclusive economic growth, improve health circumstances and outcomes, and also support people with disabilities. But we just can't take for granted the current state of the internet and imagine that that will be in the same way that it is right now forever. So economic and growth, as we see it in Australia, they've been underpinned, the innovation and the growth picture have been underpinned by the free, open and secure internet in which information flows freely across the internet transboundary. And we feel very strongly that within that development picture, still as governments, we need to fight the compulsion to control and fragment the internet. And it's not just we as governments that need to do that and feel that it should be resisted, but also other private sector entities and NGOs should also be part of that, embodying that multi-stakeholder approach that we all tie ourselves to. But in the same breath, we need to realize that the prosperity, if you like, brought by the online world has not been evenly spread. And the Indo-Pacific, in which Australia rests, is an incredibly diverse geographic region in terms of its development picture. We have some of the least developing economies in the world and some of the most highly advanced and interconnected. So what we've recently done is we've published, as Australia, an international cyber engagement strategy. We launched it at the beginning of October. And we outlined our approach to how we feel that advanced technologies will help with the development picture in our region especially, but has global application as well. And we feel that there are three key outcomes or objectives that we can look at. The first of those is looking at improving connectivity as a baseline for access to the internet across the region. And secondly is to encourage the use of resilient development enabling technologies, free governance and the delivery of digital services. And C is also to support entrepreneurship and digital skills and integration into the global marketplace. I'll just dig very briefly into those and then I can allow the next speaker to speak more eloquently than I. But the first of those, if we look at improving connectivity, and we feel that's a fundamental requirement of any technology-enabled development. And as a country, we're trying to contribute to international efforts to improve that connectivity picture to the internet and access across the Indo-Pacific. It's a task of enormous social and economic importance, and there are estimates made that for every 10% increase in broadband access and penetration, a country would increase its gross domestic product by 1.4%, which is a considerable growth rate. To facilitate that, we feel that countries need that access to submarine cables, satellites, cross-border fiber connections, cellular data services, internet exchange points, and other emerging infrastructure technologies in order that that connectivity piece takes place in the right way that it should. But it also needs to be reliant on the availability of affordable electricity supply. So what have we been doing to try and support that connectivity? We've been trying to assist in creating that digital communications infrastructure in the Indo-Pacific. We've contributed technical expertise and financial resources in contribution with the World Bank and Asian Development Bank to lay fiber optic submarine cabling connecting Samoa and Fiji. And this has facilitated improved connection at affordable rates into those countries. And we've also supported projects to enhance mobile connectivity in other Pacific Island states such as the Solomon Islands and Kiribati. The second area that I outlined was the use of resilient development enabling technologies. And we know that the role of digital technologies as enablers of development, it's expanding rapidly, and we feel that inclusive access to those technologies is absolutely crucial to ensure that individuals can more readily enjoy the opportunities that the online space involved. So access to digital information and services, we feel it empowers individuals, gives them access to all of the online services that we would want citizens to have. And it opens new channels in which people can openly engage, not only in a communicative sense, but also financially and also politically. And we're also seeing increasingly core services being delivered online, especially in the banking sphere. And we're certainly, as Australia, trying to contribute with Australian banks, increased accessibility of online banking platforms into the Pacific. But there's also a potential pitfall to the increased connectivity picture that we're seeing across the region, and that's that if poor cybersecurity practice is employed, then you begin to lose some of the benefits that you're trying to increase through that increased connectivity. But also we know that trust in the online environment, it sustains and extends the development enabling capacity of digital technologies. So building trust also in that cybersecurity picture is incredibly important. And what we're trying to do as Australia in our development projects is now taking into account the long-term security and resilience of technologies that we use to deliver that development project work in order that we see sustainable work into the future. And the final element of what I'll touch on in my 10 minutes, and then I'll pass the baton, is looking at how we support entrepreneurship and digital skills and integration. And we feel, again, that innovation and entrepreneurship are their critical factors in sustaining an open, free, and secure cyberspace. Innovators really are those that lead the way in developing new ways of communicating, of producing new business models, and keeping us all chugging forward into the future. We support public-private innovation in this space that search for innovative and entrepreneurial solutions to development challenges across the Pacific. And one of the ways that we're doing this in our strategy process is that we're going to be hosting a Technology for Development Challenge for entrepreneurs and startups from Australia and across the Indo-Pacific to find innovative technology-based solutions to regional development challenges that we identify during the course of the next 12 months. So it's twofold, if you like. Not only do companies and startups find a new way of fostering resourcing into their innovative ideas, but there's a way of applying those new and innovative ideas into the regional development mix. So just to conclude, we feel that economic growth and innovation that we currently enjoy has been underpinned entirely by a free, open and secure internet where information flows freely across borders. And our approach to assisting in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, we feel it must be done in partnership with other governments, not only those that are recipient governments, but also those who are also delivering development assistance elsewhere, but also the private sector. We realise as a government we're never going to be able to do all of this alone, and that so much of the capability that we need to harness rests in the private sector, rests in academia, rests in the NGO sector. So we feel as a country in Australia that if we follow those principles and resist the compulsion to control and fragment the internet, then we're pretty excited about what the next 15 years holds, and maybe that means that we have those passenger jets in our backyard in less than 15 years' time. But we think it will mean technological progression and economic prosperity for a far broader cross-section of society in the years to come. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Feakin, and especially for keeping it within the allotted time. You have touched upon some very, very serious issues like big data. Sometimes even don't know what is in that data, which we may come to know, say, after 5 years, that there is certain data which was collected in 2017 and can be used in 2022. You also touched upon the facilities which a disabled person can get through cyber-related assistance. You also mentioned on, say, 10% increase in internet penetration leads to 1.4% increase in GDP. I have slight reservations on that, in the sense that, firstly, it may be at the current levels of GDP of a country, yes, but then there's a limit to internet penetration, and once you reach 100%, still GDP will keep on growing. So it's not an open-ended. And second, and more serious, if we run any econometric analysis on, say, internet penetration and its impact on GDP, then GDP will also be impacting on internet penetration. So the causality is running both ways. So one needs, I don't know what kind of studies these are, but one needs some instrumental variables to go into it. But nevertheless, within the allotted time, the kind of wide coverage you have made is phenomenal, and I'm sure will benefit similarly from the other speakers also. I'll now request Sarah Taylor She's the Director, Cyber Affairs, Foreign and Commonwealth Office, UK, to share her views with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. I have a confession to make early on. It's probably best to get this out in the open. I'm a bit of a fraud on this subject. I'm not an expert on the digital economy, and I'm not an expert on development. But that was one of the reasons why I really valued the opportunity to come and be part of this panel, for two reasons. One, because it's an opportunity for me to learn about and research a subject that I'm new to, and I wanted to share some of the reflections with you today that I had learned in that study, but also, and I hope we will get to this quickly, an opportunity for me to hear from you, who I suspect are considerably more expert on this subject from me, and I hope that when we have finished this panel, we will have an opportunity to give questions, to give comments, and I'm really hopeful that we can learn from the experiences and the work that you are doing in order to help shape our own thoughts and our own national policies in this regard. So that's very much what I hope to get out of this session. And of course, the UK has a history of being an innovator, both in digital technology and also in development. So we are very excited and ambitious for where digital development can take us. As part of my researches, I learned, of course, that as early as 2001, back I think when I was just starting out in my career and just getting to grips with email, which was, I think there were some bits of the civil service in the UK at that time which were still writing letters to each other. But even as early as then, we saw the Human Development Report acknowledging how important ICTs are as a tool for human development and poverty reduction. And there are also a couple of really striking statistics, which I now fear, having heard our moderators' really insightful critique of some of the statistics that are operating in this field, he's going to pick apart. But I think that too is a really important challenge, that we are challenging and we properly interrogate the statistics that give us when we're making assumptions about the benefit of ICTs in this area. So perhaps that's also something we can touch on in our discussions. But some of the extraordinary figures that I saw quoted as as I was studying this was, for example, that for SDG 9, for Sustainable Development Goal 9, that internet access, if achieved, could generate 2.2 trillion in additional GDP, and potentially 140 million new jobs in the developing world. With regard to Sustainable Development Goal 3 on health, the idea that digital technologies used for remote diagnosis and prevention and education could save up to 188 billion by 2025. And in governance, we're already beginning to see some of those benefits. So the Nigerian EID system, for example, I believe has resulted in an annual saving of $1 billion already by exposing 62,000 ghost public sector workers. I'd quite like to be a ghost public sector worker. It sounds quite fun. Unfortunately, I'm a real one. But also, that's a return on investment, I think, if my GCSE maths is correct, of something like 20,000% in 1 year. So the kind of efficiencies that these savings that ICTs can bring to governments, indeed like the UK in these times of austerity, where every dollar counts, these efficiencies are incredibly important. But also they're important for the trust and maintenance of our democratic systems. I reflect on that in the largest democracy in the world, as we are here in India. If we look at how the EID system impacted in Nigeria, it prevented 4 million duplicate votes being counted in the 2015 election. So really tangible results in terms of improving our democratic processes, justice, the rule of law and governance across the world. And also in times of crisis, when the international community needs to work quickly and collaboratively together to support each other. We have seen incredible contributions from ICT. So if we look at the UN Development Programme, the use of mobile phones to make direct payments to response workers reached 60,000 people, workers who were in the field in remote villages, who would otherwise not have been paid and potentially therefore not have come to work to support people and delivered humanitarian aid in their time of most need. So fantastic examples already of how ICTs have contributed in this space. That's what I've learned. But I am, as I say, not a development expert, but I am a cybersecurity policy expert. That's what I do. And so I wanted to try and bring those themes together. And I think one of the most recent and potentially transformational changes that we've seen in digital development is the bringing together of development, our commitment to development and development theory, and the requirements of cybersecurity, and thinking how we can link digital development and cybersecurity together, I think, again, has an opportunity to prevent another transformational step in how we're using ICTs to improve and deliver the Sustainable Development Goals. So as cybersecurity experts, we are used to the principle that you build security by design into your products, that's absolutely essential in how we deliver new technologies. I think all of us, we spent a long time at the conference today talking about how we are trying to reverse engineer security into the internet, into a system that wasn't developed with security in mind. And I think we've learnt the lesson over the last 10, 15 years that security by design is now the way forward. And so ensuring and beginning to hardwire that principle into the development community and into the digital development community is something that in the UK, and from the conversations that I've had today, over the last few days, I can see is beginning to really take root. So you'll find the need for security already in the internationally agreed principles for digital development. You'll see the UK's upcoming digital development strategy has a really strong element and strand of cybersecurity built into it. And you'll increasingly see from the UK's perspective, we have been investing more and more and hope to invest more over the next couple of years in cybersecurity capacity building, and we'll be ensuring that that cybersecurity is hardwired into our ICT access programs, so that when we're delivering ICT access in developing countries, we're delivering cybersecurity alongside it. The do no harm principle has long been a feature for many development organizations, and that's absolutely essential. But I think that there is more to it than just do no harm. There's more gain to be had from building cybersecurity into digital development, and we should be more ambitious for what we can do. So we've been discussing the potential for a long time for digital security and resilience to be a positive contributor for development. And I want to talk a little bit about how the do no harm principle can help maximize some of those benefits. So, for example, when you empower a person to understand the value of their personal information, to give them training and tools to protect how they use their personal information, you give them the benefit of exploiting technology to the fullest. Not only is it the technology itself that is safe and secure, but their use of it is empowering, safe and secure, and their trust in the ability to use it is increased. We can also help increase the reliability and the resilience of digital services and technology, so that not only are they delivering those services, but they are resilient to threats, resilient to many of the cyber attacks that we have been talking about over the last 2 days. They recover quickly when those inevitable attacks do happen, and those services are maintained at a high level of access continuously without seeing some of these dropouts that we see. And that's not just about being frustrated because we can't get onto our internet banking at the right time, but it's also about ensuring that we are not seeing the abuse, the deliberate sowing of mistrust, disinformation into our systems that we've been seeing increasingly in some of our geopolitical interactions today. And when cybersecurity projects, as Toby was saying, stealing all my best lines as usual, when you're bringing together cybersecurity experts in government and non-government, and using the knowledge and benefit of civil society, you can open the door to new public-private partnerships, new innovative ways of delivering services that will take us in directions that we haven't thought of yet. That sitting in government, we don't have the creativity or the reach or the levers necessarily. But by fostering those partnerships, by bringing the private sector and civil society into our thinking, we're building a stronger, wider, more resilient network in terms of delivering secure digital development. There are lots of challenges, lots and lots of challenges. That's a very positive picture. I am excited about what we can do. I am ambitious for what we can do for secure digital development. But we shouldn't underestimate the challenges in this space. One of the challenges, as our facilitator reminded us, is on good measurement. Really making sure that we understand and can evaluate the impact of the work that we're doing is going to be crucial to sustaining long-term sustainable investment in delivering the Sustainable Development Goals. Actually, I think this is quite an interesting point because this is an area where we working in cybersecurity can probably learn a lot from the development community. So the development community, certainly in the UK, invests, if I look at sort of all of the different government investment programs that we run out of the UK, it is our development department and our development community that have by far the most rigorous evaluation, the most rigorous metrics for ensuring they are spending every penny well. That's not something that we do very well yet in cybersecurity, I don't think. We invest a lot of money in cybersecurity. We invest a lot of money in new technologies and in new systems, both across our public sector and encouraging the private sector to do the same. And we haven't quite got to the bottom of yet what is the cost of poor cybersecurity to our economies and what is the benefit of good cybersecurity. Oh, I'm running out of time, sorry. I've got too excited about my theme. So that's one of the areas where I think we really want to understand more, and I want to learn from the development community, and bringing those two things together is going to be important. And the other area, I think, is really understanding what good collaboration looks like. So my final point, if you'll excuse me, and I beg your pardon, is that we've made some really brilliant progress today at the conference. So I hope, unfortunately, I was in a meeting with Minister Prasad, but at the same time as that was going on, I think the Global Forum for Cyber Expertise, which brings together the development community and cyber security experts, has announced a new global agenda for cyber capacity building. We have ensured that security and development sitting side by side and informing each other, that cross-fertilization of ideas is central to the delivery of that agenda. I'm really excited about how we can make that work together. I want to hear from you about how I can do it better. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. You covered a lot on cybersecurity, which is need of the hour, and also emphasized on international cooperation on these aspects. And you also spoken on creation of jobs. I'd like to add here that your previous speaker, Mr. Feakin, he had also spoken on entrepreneurship and how more jobs can be created. And we need all these things today, all the more because what they say, robots are coming or automation is going to take place, 3D printing has come. So like that, what will be the number of jobs, new jobs being created in the medium run, one is not very sure about it. Sarah, you also touched upon efficiencies, and I'm sure that with the help of IT sector and cybersecurity and digital economies, one can enhance total factor productivity of any country, which most of the countries are not doing. Our next speaker is Ambassador Tallo from Italy. He's the coordinator for cybersecurity and OSCE conference. I request him to share his views on this issue with us.
Thank you so much. Thank you, and I have to say, well, first of all, that I'm really excited and to be here in India, because I think that this is a great opportunity, and this conference is really a place to be and a place for me to learn. And here I have to share a confession, like Sarah, that I'm completely ignorant, and this is not a surprise being a diplomat, so by definition, we are. And here I really start to enter in the topic of our meeting. So why cyber diplomacy? And again, congratulations to the organizers of this conference, because I think that the structure, the architecture of this conference is very appropriate. So say it's based on 4 pillars, and they are growth, inclusion, security, and diplomacy. Say the first 3 are certainly very important targets for any government. So if we want to have, say, the prosperity as a way to pursue happiness or well-being of a society, you certainly need growth, you need security, you need inclusion. But why diplomacy? Well, diplomacy is somehow a different league. It's not a target, but it's a tool. And it's a tool to reach the other 3. And this has always happened in history. You use diplomacy to have growth, to have security, to have inclusion, hopefully. This is something new. But in this sense, probably, the only thing I would change, though it would strange bad, is not cyber for diplomacy, but diplomacy for cyber. In the sense that diplomacy is not an end by itself. And here we have to make another confession. So we are not the end of our actions. So otherwise it would be self-referential. We are here to learn. We are here to try to see how we can help. And I think it's somehow similar to what happened on the 19th century, the beginning of the 20th century, when the trains started to go on in the railways or the cars in the streets. So independently whether you keep the right or the left, you need to have some common rules. And then, of course, you know that you can use cars or armored cars or tanks in a wrong way, but you need to have, in any case, common rules. And here comes the diplomacy. You need to have a code, you need to have a mandatory insurance, and to agree internationally on all this. It's important to do with important partners. So that's why when Prime Minister Gentiloni was here in India a few weeks ago, cyber was an important topic, and so it was agreed in the final statement that there is a strong commitment of both countries on an open, free, secure, stable, peaceful and accessible cyberspace, enabling economic growth and innovation, of course. And here I am. Here I am to speak with our Indian friends to learn in this important conference. And another aspect which is important, and I've seen the stress which was frequently repeated, is on the word inclusion. I think that when we speak about these issues in Europe, in the West, very often we stress the word freedom, which of course is for us of fundamental importance. But the word inclusion is also very important. And this is actually is also stated in the G20 summit in Hamburg this year. So the leaders of the G20, they dedicated a whole paragraph of their final statement to sharing the benefits of globalization. So this means inclusion. This means what we are doing here. And another aspect I think it's important, as it's again at the essence of being a diplomat, is being at the crossing point. And here we are somehow at the crossing point between globalization, openness, the need to grow thanks to these opportunities which have been so well highlighted my predecessors. And on the same hand, to keep this process going, to avoid the collapse of itself. In this sense, we are living this topical moment between globalization and fragmentation. New tribalism are growing everywhere. Individualism, attacks to globalization. In this sense, really, what is somehow could be the concept is localism, combining globalization and localism in an effective and constructive way. And here again, cyber diplomacy, or diplomacy for cyber as I prefer, could play a role. There are so many fora dealing with this. They are actually technical. I'm learning. It's complicated. These are the mysterious things of diplomats. Doing this, of course, in the UN, which is the natural place. In regional fora, large one like the OSCE, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, of course, the European Union, G20 I mentioned, the G7, Italy presided the G7 this year, and this was an important aspect. There was a statement at the foreign ministers meeting in Lucca, where the importance of the behavior of states in this framework has been stressed. It was interesting also the interiors minister G7 in Italy, in Ischia, where representatives of social media met the government, met the ministers. And there some important aspects have been highlighted because we suffer, of course, the attacks to the system, to the internet. But in the same time, we also suffer the contents which can be spread in internet, including terrorism, hate incitement, racism, sexism. Well, all this implies a responsibility from the private sector. So what has been asked, for instance, is to improve the use of automatic technology for the rapid detection and removal of terrorist content and prevention of its further dissemination, sharing best practices of resilience for smaller companies, because, of course, smaller companies can be an easy target. And research, of course, sharing research, and develop alternative narratives. Here we are fully in politics. Well, it's really complicated. It's really 360 degrees. It's really diplomacy in action. And I think that's why it's important to have a partnership. Governments, civil society, the academia, the companies, the private sector. That's why we hosted, for instance, in Italy, in Rome, last September, CyberTech Europe, which is one of the largest initiatives, meetings in this sector. There were more than 4,000 participants, mainly from the private sector. And in conclusion, we are already starting to share some principles. We are beginning to have some common understanding. Well, first of all, we have to focus on creating a safe and secure cyberspace, sharing best practices and technologies in order to enhance resilience. So resilience. Second, we have to improve awareness on cyber opportunities, risks, and threats, and knowledge through research and development projects. And here is important to have both aspects, the awareness on risks, but also the awareness on opportunities. And here I see, and this I like very much in India, this sense of confidence, of enthusiasm for the growth, the possibility of having more and more opportunities. And that's why it's important to have somehow to share this, and we like to be infected with this. We need it.
Thirdly, we have to develop an effective and pragmatic private-public partnership based on the three pillars, I mentioned them. The public sector, the academia, and the private sectors. So let's work all together. Let's learn each other. Sometimes the sum of ignorances makes a common wisdom. Here, of course, there are lots of experts, but I am in the field of the ignorance, so I look forward to learning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tallo. You have very beautifully covered the problems which can be generated in maintaining cybersecurity, like terrorism and the content. One has to be much more disciplined. In fact, there is SDG 12 on responsible consumption. So consumption is not only of goods, it is also of services. So that paves a lot of way. You have covered an area which is very close to the heart of Indians, that is inclusion. We had been having digital divide, but then it was thought that let people have their bank accounts. And the number of bank accounts which have been opened, the kind of coverage which we have seen, has never been seen anywhere in the world. So that's a very critical area you have covered. And you have also pointed out that ICT and digital world, these are enablers. So like the enablers which we have in SDGs, say 1.A, 1.B after all targets. So these are also very crucial enablers, and in fact, technology finds its place in SDG 17, which is on partnerships. And again, all the more, all what appears under 17 adds a lot to partnerships and global exchange and learnings. Friends, our last speaker is Dr. Omer. He's the president as well as chairman of the board of ICT in Turkey. May I request him to take the floor?
Dear Chairman, distinguished guests, on behalf of the Information and Communications Technologies Regulatory Authority of Turkey, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the government of India for their warm hospitality and welcoming us here in the beautiful city of New Delhi. It's a great pleasure for me to address such a distinguished audience gathered here on the occasion of Global Conference on Cyberspace. Dear participants, as you all know that we are living in an age of digital transformation. This transformation not only changed the interaction of people with each other, but also the interaction of people with the governments, as well as the interaction of governments with other governments. This area is all above civilizations. Technology drives the development of infrastructural civilization, and according to Grossman, for example, digital delirium, we are building the electronic republic. Even our values of democracy and many other values are being defined by the info communication processes. And this discussion finds its path in the civilization history, and all these processes triggered the rise of the virtual civilization, which is above all others today. Countries that clearly understands and wisely manages this transformation would be taking the advantage when compared to others, because the digital transformation plays a vital role in easing access to knowledge, supporting economic growth, creating new job opportunities, even increasing the democratic participation and providing transparency and accountability to us. And digital economy is defining the global network of economic interactions that is shaped and enabled by ICTs, information and communication technologies. There is no doubt that the internet is the backbone of ICT growth, resulting in a more inclusive digital economy where all layers of economic activities depend on the broadband networks and services provided among these networks. According to Oxford Economics, the total size of digital economy is estimated at 20 trillion, equivalent to roughly 14% of all sales flowing through the world economy today. It would even be more. The digital economy grows so fast that 65% of our children today will do the jobs that have been even not invented today. 65% of our children would be working in the jobs that are even not invented today. Studies show that the business productivity is boosted if the data is efficiently used and businesses are adapting themselves to the digital life, being aware of this fact quickly. Furthermore, the number of connections is increasing exponentially day by day, and the global number of connections is expected to reach 14 billion by 2022. Individuals, businesses, and governments are increasingly interconnected via host of devices at home, at work, in public places, and on the move. All these transformation became possible due to the rapid and persistent technological progress in terms of ICTs. Ladies and gentlemen, in September 2015, 193 UN member states adopted the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and 17 Sustainable Development Goals for the next 15 years have been announced, which constitute the most ambitious, inclusive global agenda ever developed for economic, social, and environmental enhancements. There has been also 230 indicators to help monitor progress, identify challenges, and guide policymakers in their efforts to implement the goals and targets in March 2016. Some of them are related with ICT indicators. ICTs have a great importance in the digital area that we live as an accelerator in development, and inclusive digital economy is set as a strategic objective for the next 4 years cycle of ITU's development sector. In this context, the Sustainable Development Goals show that ICTs can only provide a positive difference. And, for example, build resilient infrastructure, promote inclusive and sustainable industrialization, and foster innovation, which is one of the SDGs, is only possible with a secure cyberspace. Strengthening the means of implementation and revitalizing the global partnership for sustainable development is also only possible by secure cyberspace. It's us, all stakeholders, policymakers, regulators, and you who meet in these halls, responsibility to find solutions to secure the cyberspace. Therefore, it's important that we have strong outcomes from this global conference in cyberspace. Esteemed participants, I would like to give some statistics about Turkey and come to the cyberspace. Turkey's strategic vision of 2023, which is the 100th anniversary of Turkish Republic's foundation, sets very important goals regarding to ICTs, which are backbone of the digital economy. And these goals include maintaining ICT-based economic growth, transformation to knowledge-based society, and enhancing high-speed broadband for all, for every single citizen. I am proud to share that according to ITU's ICT Development Index in 2017, which has released only last week, we are one of the 2 countries that realized the most substantial improvements in terms of ICT development last year. We have like 96% of penetration, 14% of mobile broadband, and the total mobile broadband of Turkey approaches to 70%. We also have a double-digit growth in fiber cable broadband connections, namely 17.2 in actually in the fiber length, and 17.5 year on year. Moreover, we have been, like all over the world, witnessing a quick spread of mobile telephony across the globe. And only last year, we introduced the LTE Advanced in Turkey, starting from April 1st. And when you provide the technology to your citizens, it's been used very fastly. Even you are forced to provide the latest technology to your citizens, and we are working on that. We believe that ICT will be the key sector which will increase in this growth rate in the future, and this can only be possible on working on the coming technologies like 5G, Internet of Things, machine-to-machine communication, smart cities, cloud computing, and big data. I have given all of these information to show you the importance of digital economy and our future. But to ensure this future, there is one thing to be secured. It is cybersecurity. It's a fact that the more we use technology, the more we become dependent on it and vulnerable to associated risks. Individuals, companies, critical infrastructures, and states are under serious cyber threats. Ensuring cybersecurity is not a necessity just for coping with threats in technology-intensive areas anymore. Cybersecurity has become a big factor affecting nations' prosperity and part of our national security because of the risks associated with the course of social and economic life. We have seen all these in the last few years with many countries, especially attacks targeting critical infrastructures have become a huge problem for every country. In today's world, the yearly cost of cyber attacks is above $500 billion. Because of the technological development, cyber attacks has become serious, easier, and cheaper for the attackers, while the negative effects and the cost for victims are rapidly increasing. The number of attacks is estimated to increase and get more difficult to detect in the future. Cyber attacks, in the meantime, become more intelligent and more targeted. Attackers are becoming more motivated. As a result, defending against these attacks requires new and up-to-date methods and instruments. We have all experienced the Mirai botnet, which hit USA and inflicted huge economic damage. I can give many examples on that. We think this is a crucial problem which international efforts should be concentrated on in order not to experience global outages in the futures. A well-working digital economy needs a secure and a confident infrastructure. We have to work hard. However, the harder that we work, the more attacks you get in cyberspace. The important thing is that when someone considers an attack against us, we want them to bear in mind that we are one of the hardest for the attackers. We are trying to be good at cybersecurity, but we need to do and perform better. So good is not enough. There is a terminology, Chairman, that is used in the Navy. A chain is only as strong as its weakest link. It is similar in cybersecurity. All stakeholders, such as government, security, military, law enforcement, have critical roles, but with the structure of internet, international stakeholders will have a critical role to play, but even all these efforts are limited in the world of internet with no borders and starts the importance of international cooperation and understanding. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Omer. You have very rightly pointed out that cyber-related issues can help in increasing transparency in a country. It was great relief to hear that when you said that 65% of the jobs in near future will be in the areas which have not been yet invented. So that gives some relief that, okay, the next generation is going to have jobs. You're covered a lot on cyber security, and very aptly so. For me also, it has been a great learning from all the 4 panelists coming from different countries of the world. I think we have a few minutes. We can take, say, 4 questions. Kindly keep your questions brief. And please introduce yourself and to whom you are raising the question to.
From IIT Delhi. I do agree with the panelists that ICTs harness growth and can reduce absolute poverty, thus affecting SDG 1, 3 and 9. And of course, there are certain papers in economics which show through Granger's causality that ICT do empower growth and economic development. However, digitalized data economy certainly makes the people in the positive side of the digital divide, that with capabilities and access richer, and tech giants and companies still richer. So I wonder, how can digital technologies enable the facilitation of SDG 10, which is on reducing inequality?
To whom the question is addressed to?
So that could be addressed to Dr. Tobias, Ms. Sara.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think...
Any one of you can, how can we achieve SDG 10 on reducing inequalities, both within the countries and outside it?
I mean, so I take your point, and the contestability of statistics that we have in our various presentations. But how do you begin to address those inequalities? I mean, I think I laid out the kind of basic premise of that, which is, without connectivity, then people don't even have a chance to explore if, that connectivity actually gives them some sort of economic benefit. And another aspect of that is, well, it's no good if connectivity rates are increased if the potential workforce of the future are not adequately skilled to actually use that connectivity in the first place. So hand in hand with the connectivity, the increased connectivity that I think we're all trying to engender wherever we might be around the globe in this panel, has to be hand in hand the workforce upskilling too. So we as a country, for example, invest heavily in upskilling of those individuals that will be using that increased connectivity. I mentioned in my presentation also looking at the unbanked, if you will. I'm not so sure about that as a term, but we estimate within our region there's about 400 million people who are still unbanked. Well, it's no good if you're a first-time user and using those banking platforms and you don't have adequate cyber safety skills and cyber security skills to understand what risks you might also be carrying. So I think what I'm saying is, yeah, you need the connectivity to be able to even explore the possibilities of that economic growth, but if it doesn't come with sufficient training as well, well then you might fall down at the first hurdle. I've been using the example of the Pacific quite a lot, but if you look at the transformation of that region, it's incredible. 10 years ago, it was serviced by one overhead satellite for its entire internet connectivity. Now you have more undersea cabling projects there than any other place on the planet. So that presents an enormous opportunity for the upshift of the economic development, social development of that region, but it's also got to be done with a mindset of huge risk that you're also absorbing, which could easily, if you like, lose that SDG 10. It would, if you like, almost exacerbate those divides unless there's enough training, skills, and awareness in advance of that connectivity coming in space. So I think we're working pretty hard to make sure that we address the gaps as far as possible.
Yeah, you can please add.
Very, very briefly, and I think it's a really important point. When I was negotiating WISS Plus 10, the World Summit on Information Society 10-year review, one of the things that we reflected in the outcome document for that was that inequality in the digital world doesn't only exist between countries, but it exists between people within countries, between men and women, between the rich and the poor. And the idea of how we ensure that those inequalities can be addressed as part of building in access is really important. So I just came from a meeting with Minister Prasad, and he had a really interesting way of putting it. I think that his focus was going to be digital access, digital inclusion, and digital security. And you have to tie all of those things together if you're really going to reap the benefits from digital development. And so, to Toby's point, I think that, and it's something that we struggle with in the UK as well, is how do you bridge some of that inequality? We have groups of people within the UK, the elderly, for example, who simply don't have the kind of accesses and the abilities to use this new technology that other people have. And so the opportunity to be in a place like this and learn from other societies who are struggling with those inequalities as well, how can we address those things together, is going to be really important.
Thank you. Let us give chance to others also. Anyone from this side? Any questions?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bhumika, and I'm your remote moderator. Since we are live right now, so we have some audience, international audience as well as national audience, who have joined us from the webinar mode. One of our international viewer, Mr. Mike Nelson, has put up a question for all the panelists. I'll just read that out. I worked on internet development for the Clinton White House. Our mantra was, first, do no harm. Will each panelist point to examples where government are doing harm today?
Any takers? It's a tough one. I think Sarah wants to reply.
Go on then. An example of where government do harm. Well, I think I would point out the point that I made previously about how we in cybersecurity are just beginning to get to grips with evaluating the impact of the work that we do. And so I think one of the areas that I'm really interested in exploring as the UK invests more and more in cybersecurity and development is to make sure that we are properly evaluating that. And I think we are doing harm if we're investing money and wasting it. If we're not spending our money correctly, if we are missing opportunities, if we're spending it in the wrong place, if, as the fantastic work of the Global Forum on Cyber Expertise has been trying to tackle, we're not properly coordinating our investment in access programs and cybersecurity programs with each other to ensure that we're not simultaneously duplicating work. All of these things are potential harm because they are crimes of omission. We are not making the best opportunities.
I can happily have a
Yes,
crack
please.
at that.
Yes.
Something we're working hard on in terms of the programs that we're delivering is about, we can do harm if we're not thinking about sustainability of any project that we deliver, if we're just literally, if you like, dropping development aid or assistance without that long-term plan of how it builds domestic capability and puts, you know, whatever it is we're delivering into the hands of the users and trains them in the ability to use it in the longer term, then we'll be doing harm in that way, because I think there's no use in short-term delivery options of development assistance at all.
Yes, please.
Maybe I can say a few words about the education. I mean, I'm sure that we need a lot of cyber experts and so on, and the education level and the educated people who are really becoming experts is not an easy task, and there should be a lot of educational programs and training programs also that we would be having and focusing more on education so that people will learn, will be conscious, and we can use them as experts.
Thank you. Any more questions? Yeah, yes, please.
Thank you. Thank you for all the presentations. I have benefited a lot. I am the ambassador of Turkey in India. My question will be to Ms. Taylor, because she described herself as cybersecurity expert of the Foreign and Commonwealth Office of UK, and maybe His Excellency from Italy could add a few words after Ms. Taylor's reply. Is there a cybersecurity umbrella for the EU member states, and does it work effectively, confined to the members? And if there is one, will the UK be deprived of its benefits, benefits of this umbrella after the Brexit? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Almost got away without a Brexit question. Never happens to me these days. We do cooperate very closely with the EU on cybersecurity, both in terms of cybersecurity development aid and development programs. The UK has the honour of currently being one of the leading bidders in the delivery of a EU cybersecurity development bid. But we also work closely both in terms of supporting the cybersecurity of the EU institutions and each other through our ability to act using the recently agreed EU cybersecurity toolbox, for example, which is an opportunity to work and collaborate with each other to use our national facilities to support each other in times of difficulty. It is not constrained to the EU, as we've learned and we've heard from many of the speakers, that our security relies on everyone's security in this space, and so the EU works very closely with a wide range of partners. Cyber is a key theme in many of the dialogues between the EU and third-party member states. We work very closely with NATO and the EU in our cybersecurity, now that cyber has been named as a fourth domain within NATO, along with air, land and sea. And to get to the crux of your problem, I'm not avoiding it, I promise. We in the UK, we're leaving the EU, we're not leaving Europe. And our cyber collaboration, our security collaboration with all of our partners, both in Europe and beyond, with India, with partners right across the world, is as strong. We are as firmly committed to that as we ever were. For us, security is a non-tradable good. We are not negotiating our security as part of our exit of the EU, and we have every intention, are committed to, and look forward to continuing the very, very close collaboration with our European partners as now.
I think we can have one more question. The lady wanted to ask. Still ask?
Solve the problem of inequality in terms of access, but what I really wonder is inequality in terms of earnings. So do we start taxing the tech companies who are earning supernormal profits supernormally? So tech companies in the digital data economy make supernormal profits. So to reduce inequality, do we start taxing them supernormally also? Inequality is not in terms of access and capabilities, but inequalities in terms of earnings.
So I'll have a go, and then I will hand over quickly to my colleagues. So I think if I'm understanding, this is about a question about whether it's unfair that certain large communication service providers and ISPs are able to avoid tax tax liability in certain countries by basing themselves in other locations. So first of all, the thing to say is nothing, as far as we can see, that these companies are doing is illegal. It is incumbent upon us as governments to reassure ourselves that our tax codes, both the ones that we coordinate through our groups where we work on fiscal matters, but also within our own national boundaries, are effective and deliver the policies that our own governments want to achieve. So the ability to tax where we want to tax. Countries make a lot of decisions, for example, on reducing rates of corporation tax, giving tax breaks that suit their national interest because there are other things that they want to achieve, such as jobs, inward investment, and countries need the flexibility to be able to do that. One of the things I hope that we will see in the longer term as we increase access, as we increase inclusion, is the ability of countries to grow their own big companies, to build their own industries and their sectors so that we're not reliant on a small number of companies providing services to most of the world. And the ability to see companies grow, to build more competition into the market, I think is something that we are very interested in seeing. We're very interested within the EU at the moment in how we're using not digital laws, not ICT laws, but the existing fiscal market regulations that we have to provide the right kind of incentives to build the right kind of competition into these markets. And I think that's the key, is we shouldn't think about this as a vertical ICT issue. This is a horizontal market competition issue,
And we need to be using all of those levers to try and address that.
Thank you very much. I think we have had a great panel, and I request you all to join hands with me to clap for them. Thank you very much.